pressure is boiling over at Ibrox as Russell Martin edges closer to the sack, and you won't believe the decision that's got supporters raging after the Alloa clash. Rangers transfer chaos deepens as the Nobel Mendy deal collapses at the last hurdle. Meanwhile, a shock move for Aston Villa's Alex Moreno emerges, but with a £6 million price tag. And to top it off, a controversial return to the squad has fans questioning if Martin's even trying to stay in the job. Every twist, every controversy, and the brutal truth behind the headlines, it's all coming up in today's explosive update. Russell Martin is pressing ahead with his rebuild, and even after bringing in 10 new faces, he's not finished shopping just yet. The next name in the frame, Jaden Meghoma, a 19-year-old left-back currently with Brentford but who previously worked under Martin at Southampton. The plans to bring him in on loan, especially with Jeff Day set to join Palmeiras in a deal worth £6 million, and Ridvan Yilmaz eyeing a return to Besiktas. Now, Martin's already sung Meghoma's praises in the past. After a cup win with Southampton, he told Jake Livermore that Meghoma was mature, calm, and intelligent, going as far as saying the lad was developing fast on the defensive front. Big words, but let's be honest, words don't win matches at Ibrox, performances do. And that's where the doubts begin. Let's look at the hard numbers from his loan spell at Preston last season. 0 goals, just over 1 assist. Every 10 games, a passing accuracy just scraping above 73%. He was part of a Preston side that were flirting with relegation, and he only made 14 appearances. That's not exactly the pedigree you'd expect from someone meant to come in and stabilize a defense that's already leaking. Sure, he might be seen as a backup option, maybe even a short-term patch for the left side, especially after the Max Aarons experiment on that flank has gone the way of a Celtic penalty claim, wildly optimistic and utterly unconvincing. But here's the bigger picture. Rangers need to be aiming higher. If the likes of Max Aarons, Nasser Giga, and Emmanuel Fernandez are the standard, then bringing in a lad with barely 20 senior appearances under his belt doesn't scream title challenge, does it? Russell Martin is clearly banking on familiarity and potential, and fair enough, he knows the player. But this is Rangers. You don't get time to wait on potential. You need impact, you need presence, you need players who walk through the door ready to take the fight to Celtic, not learn on the job. Now, here's what I want to know, and I'm asking you directly. Is Russell Martin showing ambition with this move for Meghoma, or is he just using Rangers to develop Premier League youth players at the expense of winning trophies? Well, what could have been a solid step forward for Rangers' backline has turned into a case of what might have been, and right when Russell Martin needed everything to start clicking. Nobel Mendy will not be pulling on that famous blue shirt this summer, despite a deal being all but agreed, with £2 million set aside and a medical lined up in Barcelona. The move has fallen through. Negotiations hit the skids between Rangers and Real Betis, and now the 22-year-old is stuck in limbo in Spain. We're being told to watch this space, but let's not kid ourselves. When a deal collapses this close to the finish line, it's rarely revived without a serious U-turn. This one will sting for Martin, no doubt. With Nasser Giga now suspended after that sending off against Dundee at Ibrox and a trip to St Mirren looming large, the squad's already being stretched. Emmanuel Fernandez will likely step in for the domestic ties, but it's the Champions League qualifier against Club Brugge that really sharpens the focus. That's where a player like Mendy, quick, composed, already blooded in La Liga, could have made a real difference. Instead, Martin's back to juggling short-term patches and hoping Giga doesn't lose the rag again when he's back in the lineup. And with all eyes on qualifying for the group stages of Europe's biggest stage, it's hard not to feel that this failed transfer could prove more than just a blip. Should Rangers even be targeting players like Mendy, who clearly view the club as a stepping stone, or is it time to stop chasing La Liga cast-offs and start signing players who actually want to fight for silverware at Ibrox? Right, here's a name that's come out of nowhere, but one that's stirred a bit of curiosity and maybe even a raised eyebrow or two. Alex Moreno, Aston Villa's Spanish fullback, is now being linked with a move to Ibrox, and this isn't some young loanee we're talking about. This is a 32-year-old with nearly 2 decades of experience behind him, including spells at Rayo Vallecano, Real Betis, and more recently, Nottingham Forest on loan. Now, he's apparently on Rangers' radar, alongside Girona and his old pals at Betis, as the left-back crisis deepens. Let's not sugarcoat it. Left-back is a shambles right now. Jefte's bags are already halfway to Brazil. Ridvan Yilmaz is more out the door than in the dressing room. Robbie Fraser's off to Dunfermline, and poor Max Aarons, bless him, is being thrown to the wolves out of position. It's like watching a Sealy dancer being asked to do ballet. You can admire the effort, but it's not what he's built for. So in comes the suggestion of Moreno. Not cheap, mind you. Aston Villa are wanting £6 million, and you can bet they're not budging too much, even if Betis are begging and Girona are sniffing around. That price tag's no joke for a player on the wrong side of 30, but the flip side is he's proven. He's been through La Liga battles, he's featured in the Premier League, and he was even labelled a major coup by former Rangers man Ross Wilson during his Forest days. The question is, would he want the move north? Reports say he's open to it, but let's be real. A return to sunny Seville or a move to Girona has its own appeal. Playing on those tidy Spanish pitches in mild weather, sipping cortados after training, or coming up to Govan and trying to keep up with pacey wingers on frozen turf in December, it's a very different proposition. Still, with a Champions League qualifier against Club Brugge on the horizon and Martin's defense stretched thinner than a Celtic fan's sense of humor, you need someone who's ready to slot in and perform from minute one. No, maybe one for the future, no projects. Moreno would bring a bit of experience, bit of nastiness, and you know he wouldn't shy away from a derby at Ibrox. Would signing a 32-year-old left-back for £6 million be a bold statement of intent from Rangers, or just another example of short-term panic, buying under a manager who's struggling to plan for the long term? Russell Martin's seat at Ibrox isn't just getting warm, it's practically smoking, and after the shambles we witnessed in the League Cup against Alloa, you'd be forgiven for wondering if the man's trying to get himself sacked before September even arrives. Let's start with the baffling decision that sent heads spinning across Govan: Kieran Dowell in the starting 11, a player who's spent more time in the treatment room or on the bench than on the park, a player most had quietly written off, and yet, in a game screaming out for a spark, a platform for young talent like Findlay Curtis, who's actually shown glimpses of promise in Europe, Martin goes with Dowell against Alloa. At Ibrox, you couldn't write it, and surprise, surprise, it was a slog. Rangers stumbled to a 4-2 win over a League One outfit when it should have been a statement. No confidence, no cohesion, just confusion. Meanwhile, Celtic are already 4 points clear, playing with swagger, while Rangers look like they've turned up late to a party that's already over. You drew against Dundee, you dropped points to Motherwell, and now, with St Mirren on the horizon and a Champions League showdown with Club Brugge not far behind, you're left asking, is this really what the 49ers signed up for? And here's the kicker. Martin's apparently reaching out to ex-teammates like Andy Halliday, who've publicly dismantled his tactics and admitting he's listening to the noise. That's not defiance. That's desperation. Now, let's be honest, Martin wasn't the people's choice to begin with. When names like Davide Ancelotti were getting tossed around and we ended up with a manager fresh off a relegation with Southampton, many felt shortchanged. Now, after 3 wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss, the early warning signs are flashing brighter than a fire alarm in a Celtic pub. This squad's had investment. The ownership have backed Martin. The rebuild has begun, but there's only so long the project excuse will hold before the Ibrox crowd turn. And if we lose the Old Firm clash at the end of August, you can forget projects. You'll hear calls for change from every corner of the stadium, and they won't be polite. If Russell Martin loses to Celtic and falls double digits behind in the table, should the board pull the trigger immediately, or would keeping him prove the 49ers don't understand what Rangers really means? If you haven't seen yesterday's video yet, you're missing out. Explosive news about Rangers that'll leave every fan stunned. Go check it out now.